It's 5 p.m. here in Lagos, Nigeria. Welcome to the World Today. I'm Joke Rogers. Here's what's coming up on the program. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians returned to North Gaza after Israel opened routes through the Netzarim corridor. Egypt launches Sharing for Humanity, its largest humanitarian aid convoy for residents of Gaza. Plus, thousands of people flee as M23 rebels claim Goma city in the DR Congo. The World Today begins right now. Welcome again, everyone. We begin in Gaza, where hundreds of thousands of Palestinians returned to northern Gaza after Israel opens checkpoints. The Netzarim corridor crossing opened to pedestrians at 7 a.m. local time, allowing Palestinians to begin returning north. Israel delayed the opening on Saturday after a dispute over a hostages release. Vehicles were allowed to cross the checkpoint after inspection from 9 a.m. local time, but for those in cars, it could take days to cross the checkpoint. More than 200,000 people entered the north on foot in the first 2 hours of the crossing opening. Most are returning to damaged houses and buildings, but for many others, they are returning to rubble and ruins. Satellite images show the north of Gaza suffered the worst damage in the Gaza Strip, with Gaza City almost three-quarters damaged or destroyed. Analysis of satellite images suggests northern Gaza is the most damaged part of the Strip, with 74% of buildings damaged or destroyed in the city. On Saturday, President Donald Trump of the United States suggested a clean-out of Gaza with Palestinians resettled in Jordan and Egypt. The idea was quickly rejected by both countries. Well, speaking of Egypt, the country has launched what it calls its largest humanitarian aid convoy for the residents of the Gaza Strip under the banner Sharing for Humanity. The convoy, consisting of 305 trucks, is loaded with an estimated 4,200 tons of food and humanitarian aid, along with 11 fully equipped ambulances. It includes medical devices, essential supplies, medicines, ambulances, large quantities of non-perishable food items, ready-to-eat canned goods, clothing, blankets, as well as baby milk and food. Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouly notes that this marks the fifth convoy organized by Tahrir Misr Fund in collaboration with civil society organizations to provide assistance and relief to Palestinians in Gaza. In the meantime, pro-Palestine organizations have staged a rally in The Hague to demand the government to take actions against Israel as they mark the first anniversary since the International Court of Justice concluded that Tel Aviv's actions in Gaza could be deemed as genocide, following South Africa's file for the case in December 2023. Footage shows the activists marching to the streets with Palestinian and Lebanese flags, banners and signs calling for Palestine's freedom and divestment from Israel. Heavy police presence was also spotted along the route, as well as outside the Peace Palace, where protesters were heading to. Other demonstrations, meanwhile, demanded the Dutch government to boycott, divest and sanction Israeli products and urged for increasing international solidarity for the Palestinian people.
Israel broke the measure. They're committing war crimes every single day. This genocide has been ongoing for over a year and a half, and they have taken no measures to stop it. It's now up to us to make them stop. And we have to support the resistance. First off, we have to show that we stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people, always and everywhere. We have to organize international solidarity, and of course we have to boycott, divest and sanction Israeli products.
I think the only thing we can do as civilians is to continue boycotting, because it's our governments that should be applying all the rules, and they're not. So we have power, we can vote with our money, with our actions.
We can see that the international community, as represented by imperialist institutions, has no moral compass and has no will to actually protect people.
In the West Bank, things are getting worse at the moment. So, of course, I hope this is the beginning of a process in which things will turn for the better, but, well, I hope so, but I'm not convinced.
In the meantime, hundreds of pro-Palestine activists marched through the streets of Brussels this time to demand a permanent ceasefire in Gaza and an end to arms deals with Israel. Sunday's protest shows banners with messages such as "Stop Genocide," "Jews for Free Palestine," "Stop Arming Israel," "Rise Up for Palestine," and "Suspend EU-Israel Association Agreement." The protest comes after Israel-Hamas ceasefire deal came into force on Sunday, January 19, with the first 3 hostages exchanged for 90 Palestinian prisoners and detainees. The agreement itself covers 3 phases, with the first 6-week part set to include the release of up to 33 hostages, women, children, and older people, and hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. According to reports, those being freed by the Israeli side were detained for a wide range of alleged security offenses, from throwing stones and inciting violence online to attempted murder. Elsewhere now, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Rwandan-backed rebels have taken over much of the city of Goma in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo. The sound of gunfire filled the air this morning, with reports of Congolese and Rwandan troops firing at each other across the border. Columns of M23 rebels have entered the city. Some Congolese troops have followed a rebel order to hand over their weapons to UN peacekeepers. In less than a month, the rebel advance has displaced more than 400,000 civilians. There have also been reports of a mass escape from a prison in Goma. The security source told local media that the prison holding 3,000 inmates was totally torched and the jailbreak had resulted in deaths. Many parts of Goma have also been cut off from power in many areas of the city amid the entry of the rebels. As a result of the crisis, thousands of people, including Congolese soldiers, are fleeing into Rwanda as M23 rebels advanced on the eastern Congolese city of Goma. Several sites of the outskirts of the city, sheltering more than 300,000 displaced people, are said to be completely emptied out in space of a few hours. The United Nations says as fighting escalates in the city, key roads surrounding Goma are blocked, cutting off vital access points, while the city's airport is paralyzed, halting all evacuation and humanitarian efforts. Since the start of the 2025, more than 400,000 people have been forced from their homes in the provinces of North and South Kivu, near the border with Rwanda. That's according to the UN's refugee agency. The Rwanda-backed rebel group claimed to have seized control of the city, defying UN Security Council demands to end the offensive. Meanwhile, the Democratic Republic of Congo's top diplomat is calling for international accountability in addressing her country's ongoing conflict. DR State Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs, Therese Kiakwamba Wagner, says this crisis is not a DRC-specific crisis, adding that the challenge right now is in areas where MONUSCO is still present. During a press encounter at the UN headquarters, she said she also inquired how it's permissible that a country, one of the largest troop-contributing countries, gets away with killing peacekeepers. The minister also reflected on the security dynamics in the DRC, expressing appreciation for the support and resilience of DRC forces, MONUSCO troops, as well as SADC troops.
MONUSCO was sequential, and it was not a mistake, because in the areas where MONUSCO withdrew, we have seen sustained peace, we have seen progress, and we have seen stability. The challenge that we find ourselves in right now is in areas where MONUSCO is still present. So this has nothing to do with MONUSCO's presence. This has something to do with the fact that a neighboring country, Rwanda, has been permitted by the international community, by its donors, by its partners, to wreak havoc in the DRC, in particular in North Kivu, even in the presence of United Nations peacekeeping troops, with one of the most robust mandates of the United Nations. What I say to troop contributing countries, and this is very important because Rwanda itself is one of the UN's largest troop contributing countries, is that this crisis is not a DRC specific crisis. This should compel all troop contributing countries to engage in a robust conversations with the United Nations, with DPKO, on what it means to be a troop contributing countries. How is it permissible that a country, one of the largest troop contributing countries, gets away with killing peacekeepers, as peacekeepers from South Africa, Malawi, Uruguay were killed in less than 24 hours. It is a tense situation. We are following and monitoring it closely. We are grateful for the support and the resilience of our own armed forces, but also the presence and the support of MONUSCO troops as well as SADC troops. I will not delve into speculations. I am confident in the resolve of all involved forces to uphold the territorial integrity of the DRC, and most importantly, to protect the civilian lives which are at stake right now. Now, when it comes to sanctions and to the absence thereof, more importantly, of course we're disappointed. Of course we're disappointed because as an African country, how often is it that we have to listen to the lessons, that we have to listen to what we ought to be doing, the rules we are to be following, and at the same time find ourselves in this edifice and see that the rules that we all consider to be holy, to be precious.
In the meantime, the United Nations has issued urgent calls for action to address the deteriorating situation in the DRC as the conflict in the country's eastern region threatens lives and property and millions of lives. During an emergency meeting of the Security Council, Bintou Keita, the UN Special Representative in the DRC, called on the Council to act immediately to protect civilians and workers and UN personnel. The UN Secretary General for Peace Operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, says the fate of Goma and its millions of inhabitants hangs in the balance. Rwanda's representative, Ernest Kwamsio, on the other hand, spoke against the international community, which he says chose to condemn the M23 for extending its territories without condemning the DRC military coalition for violating a ceasefire that was in place.
Today, despite ongoing MONUSCO support to FRDC, M23 and Rwandan forces penetrated Munigi, captured in the outskirts of Goma city, causing mass panic and flight among the population. Roads are blocked and the airport can no longer be used for evacuation or humanitarian efforts. M23 has declared the airspace over Goma closed. In other words, we are trapped. I call on this council to act now to secure the civilian population, humanitarian aid workers, and all United Nations personnel.
Mr. President, Rwanda regrets the deteriorating security situation in the eastern region of the Democratic Republic of Congo. The current crisis could have been averted had the DRC government demonstrated a genuine commitment to peace. The DRC has all the necessary tools to achieve a lasting resolution to the ongoing conflict.
Well, Kenya has also been reacting to the crisis. President William Ruto has called for an emergency leaders meeting, urging presidents of Rwanda and Congo to heed the call of peace. President Ruto said that the leaders of the East Africa Community bloc has agreed to hold an extraordinary summit to address the current conflict in eastern Congo. The M23 rebel movement, reportedly backed by Rwanda, has advanced swiftly this month in the Democratic Republic of Congo's mineral-rich but conflict-riven eastern borderlands, raising fears that the fighting could spill over into a regional war. Rwanda denies accusations by the UN and others that it backs M23. EAC leaders have faced significant challenges in addressing the conflict in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, despite multiple summits and peace initiatives such as the Luanda process. Their efforts have also often been criticized for lacking effectiveness and failing to produce lasting solutions.
The escalating conflict and deteriorating situation in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo are a grave concern to the people and governments of East Africa. Noting the worsening humanitarian crisis exacerbated by ongoing military actions, including the closure of airspace in Goma, I call for the immediate and unconditional cessation of hostilities. I call on the parties to the Luanda process on Eastern DRC and appeal specifically to my brothers, President Felix Tshisekedi and President Paul Kagame, both of whom I have had the occasion to speak to this evening, to heed the call for peace from the people of our region and the international community. We will be convening an extraordinary East African Community Summit within the next 48 hours to facilitate and to deliberate on this crisis and chart a way forward.
And in a tragic turn of events, just like we've mentioned earlier, 13 soldiers, including 9 South African peacekeepers stationed in eastern Congo, have been killed in battles with the M23 rebels. The South African National Defense Union has extended heartfelt condolences to the families of 3 South African soldiers who lost their lives in the DRC. South Africa's ambassador to the United Nations has also paid tribute to the peacekeepers. Ambassador Matu Joyini told members of the UN Security Council that the peacekeepers showed immense bravery amidst relentless attacks from the M23. Ms. Joyini adds that the South Africa stands ready to continue promoting peace and stability in eastern Congo.
It is with profound regret that this meeting is taking place at a time when a number of peacekeepers have lost their lives and many others injured in the line of duty. 9 of these fallen peacekeepers are South Africans who showed immense bravery amidst relentless attacks from the M23. These attacks from the M23 are in violation of the ceasefire that was brokered through the Luanda process. We deplore the unwarranted attacks against MONUSCO and the South African Development Community Mission in the DRC's uniformed personnel who are deployed not only to promote peace, security, and stability in the Eastern DRC, but by extension in the African continent in general. It is crucial for the Rwandan Defense Forces to cease support to the M23, and for the M23 to immediately cease all hostile actions and withdraw from occupied territories. We cannot accept a world wherein non-state actors are armed to do the will of other states, while those states refuse to accept responsibility for unnecessary armed violence and potential war crimes. Peacekeeping as a tool will be rendered ineffective when the peacekeepers and peacekeeping operations face complex political situations, such as that in the Eastern DRC, when other states get militarily involved in fueling conflict.
I now give the floor to
The international community can no longer afford to simply watch as conflict in the Eastern DRC continues to displace, maim, and kill innocent civilians. The current situation in the Eastern DRC requires decisive action from the international community led by this Council. The Security Council must use the tools at its disposal to act against those who perpetuate the conflict in the Eastern DRC, including calling for their withdrawal from the DRC. There must also be a resumption of both the Luanda and Nairobi processes to find a lasting political solution to the cyclical conflict in the Eastern DRC.
Earlier on, my colleague Layo Olarinde spoke with Kobus Meres, an independent defense analyst and former shadow minister for defense in South Africa from Cape Town. He gave his analysis on the impact of the M23's advance into Goma on regional stability.
It is a very sad situation. The moment anywhere in the world where private citizens are displaced and it creates a humanitarian crisis, obviously that is a sorry sight. It is even worse, I think, in the case of the Eastern DRC, where the M23 is are apparently, equipped and assisted and hosted by Rwanda, the neighboring country. And that is an unattainable situation and should not be, should not be allowed to happen. What is important for me is that when you look at the Eastern African group, or that borders of the Eastern DRC, all that countries, including the DRC, are members of the East African community. Now, while appreciating the role that United Nations must play, and what they have done already up to date, I don't see and hear the role and the responsibilities of the Eastern African Community Group, the Economic Community Group, and the African Union. This is not a South African war. We have 5 SADC countries that is in between South Africa and the DRC. So what is happening in the DRC is no threat to the South African integrity and the safety of our people. However, if it is a threat to the South, I ask the question, where are Angola and where are Zambia, who is the immediate neighboring SADC countries and members, but they are not involved? Why aren't they not involved? Is it because they feel that there's no threat to them? And is it true that they feel that the problem must be resolved around the table by Eastern African Community Group countries and members and the African Union? There is no ways that this conflict will be resolved through the barrel of a gun. And we must, hopefully, the United Nations and the member states will use their influence so that they can become, can get a peace, a ceasefire situation, and so that this active war that is going on, which is becoming a civil war in the Eastern DRC, can be resolved before any further lives are lost. There's already too many civilians that has been displaced, and it's not fair and reasonable on the families of the South African deceased in the DRC. The same to the Malawians and the other UN member states, soldiers, fallen soldiers. So a solution must be found. Otherwise, that will impact not only the whole of the Central Africa, but it can escalate into further north, west, east, and south.
Indeed. You mentioned, the East African community earlier on. We're seeing Kenya calling for an emergency regional leaders meeting. Now, what should be the crux of that meeting? Because there are implications of this crisis for regional stability,
Remember, I think it's a very good thing that Kenya is calling for that, because Kenya is one of the big members of the Eastern African Community Group. And it fits into my narrative that the East African Community Group must sit around the table and resolve this. This affects all of them. It affects all of their economies and their civilians. Remember, the rumors are that all of the rebel groups, not only the M23, who is reportedly operating from Rwanda land, but all the other rebel groups. There's the allegations that they operate from neighboring countries like Uganda. Now, if that is the case, then Uganda, Kenya, DRC, Rwanda, Burundi, all of those nations, Tanzania, must sit around the table and resolve this problem. They know what the root cause of these problems are, and it is not something that we should shoot each other and kill each other. If it is about the land of the DRC and Rwanda, there are international laws and rules and regulations, and the United Nations and the African Union must play a more significant role. I haven't heard anything from the African Union, and obviously from the UN. I hope that they will encourage and put pressure on the African Union to play a more constructive role to get these countries around the table and resolve their problems. Because I cannot see the justification of killing more people and sacrificing lives of people who's got no interest really in that war, and referring there to the South African soldiers that has died since Friday.
Well, this crisis, the DRC is accusing Rwanda of being in this crisis and has also severed all diplomatic ties with Rwanda amid this rebel offensive. But how can diplomatic efforts now be strengthened to de-escalate tensions?
See, one can either hide behind a conflict and say that we don't want to speak to each other, or you can see this stumbling block, which is a major stumbling block, as an opportunity to force people to sit around the table. If something, they have not felt the force and the pressure to really resolve this problem. We know that there are many rumors of why they're doing it. We know that, I said, it comes from the Houthis and the Tutsi conflicts of many years ago. Some people say it's about mineral rights. Whatever the case might be, and whatever the people want to put on the table, they must be allowed to put that on the table, and it must be resolved. But that's why those countries must sit there, and they must have, from the African Union, people who are objective, and even if the United Nations is prepared to assist in that regard as well. Because you need some neutral people and neutral parties, non-partisan parties, to say, you believe you are right, you are unfair, here is the evidence for or the evidence against. They must use this opportunity, because there might not be many more like this that we have got now. As I've said, we must also remember that many of the countries are supporting rebel groups and actually are equipping them incredibly well. In some cases, and even most of the cases, they are these days better equipped than the South African National Defence Force members. Our soldiers are well trained, they are brave, but if they are sent into a war situation, proverbially with their hands down behind their back, then you must expect them to come home to their families in body bags, which is not fair, which is not what they signed up for. They signed up for peacekeeping missions, not to fighting wars between conflicting parties in the eastern DRC.
Welcome back. A looming trade war between the US and Colombia appears to have been averted after the Colombian government agreed to allow US military flights carrying deported migrants to land in the Andean country. The spat erupted on Sunday when President Gustavo Petro barred 2 military planes carrying Colombians deported from the US from landing. The Trump administration responded by threatening to slap punitive tariffs on Colombian exports to the US. President Petro at first said Colombia would retaliate by imposing tariffs on US goods, but the White House later announced that Colombia had agreed to accept migrants, including those arriving on US military aircraft, without limitation or delay. The White House hailed the agreement with Colombia as a victory for Mr. Trump's hardline approach after the country's 2 leaders had exchanged threats on social media on Sunday. Meanwhile, nearly 1,000 immigration arrests were carried out on Sunday as U.S. President Donald Trump's promise of mass deportations ramps up. The sanctuary city of Chicago has been a focus of the raids, with Immigration and Customs Enforcement also targeting areas in Miami and New Jersey. According to Immigration and Customs Enforcement, this number of migrants is the most since Donald Trump returned to power. A number of federal agencies with newly expanded detention powers were involved in the raids in a number of cities, including Chicago, Newark, New Jersey, and Miami. Since taking office, Mr. Trump has carried out 21 executive actions to overhaul the U.S. immigration system. Let's get more on this. Our correspondent in Washington, Maria Bird, joins us now. Maria, great to see you today. What more can you tell us about the deportations we're seeing?
Yes, well, this is the largest, as you mentioned, the largest scale deportation since the Trump administration began. We're talking about nearly 1,000 people, 965 approximately. And this was carried out in Chicago, Miami, and also Colorado. And so what we heard in Chicago was that the government there was warning people to heed to what was getting ready to happen with ICE deporting individuals, encouraging people to know their rights, to know what they have the right to. And then in Miami, there was one incident specifically where a man, his wife was actually detained. And so obviously major outrage when you talk about this number of people that in just one day on Sunday evening were deported. In comparison to, on average, there were about 330 individuals per day during the Biden administration. And typically these were individuals that had committed some sort of a crime. And so when you talk about triple the number of individuals, definitely this has created some concern across the country.
And this number is the largest since Mr. Trump returned to office, as we've been told. Any indications that the numbers may still rise?
Well, it's highly likely, potentially, that we could see larger numbers in days to come. Obviously, it takes some time to kind of get the administration's, obviously, their intelligence and all that they have to do to ensure that they are clear on where these individuals are. So now that we are obviously about a week into the administration, we can expect over the next couple of weeks to potentially even see larger numbers per day of those who are deported. As we all know, this was one of the main points in President Trump's campaign promise, was that he would be deporting individuals who were undocumented and here illegally. So I don't think that we may not, but it is potentially that we could see even larger numbers per day as the days go on.
And why is a city like Chicago considered a sanctuary city?
Well, Chicago has certain rules in place, and from the city government perspective, that has made those who are immigrating to the U.S., provided them with some asylum, provided them with some additional services. So that is to your point, a sanctuary city that provides additional services that some states and some cities across the country do not provide.
And by the target on, there's some other cities that were identified as, the targets for deportations, such as Newark, New Jersey, and Miami.
Yes, Newark, New Jersey, we know that there's a large number of those who migrate to the U.S. that go to that New York region. Newark, New Jersey is just outside of New York City. So that is a region that would have a large concentration of those who have immigrated to the U.S. We also know that Miami has always had a very large number of individuals who have migrated to the U.S. There's a large community there as well. And so those are places where you're going to see larger numbers of individuals. And so obviously when you have the larger concentration, the federal government is going to obviously focus in on those communities as well.
Right, and they'll help us understand the spat that was, to ensue with Colombia, owing to the deportations that were taking place and, the delays that were experienced within Colombia.
So this was going to potentially be a trade war. We know that the president has stated and threatened steep tariffs across the globe. And this was going to be one that Colombia could have seen an increased tariff due to this potential trade war. And so they agreed to accept those deported migrants, and so that obviously avoided that trade war that potentially could have ensued. And as I heard you say earlier, the White House has claimed this as victory. Obviously, most of, or quite a bit of, the president's inaugural speech talked about America being respected again, and ensuring that America is respected across the world. And part of this is what he is touting as one victory toward the respect that America should be gaining across the world. And so he's looking at this as a sign of triumph and victory. And hopefully we will not see, obviously, this type of challenge with Colombia and the U.S. Moving forward, as we know that there's imminent potential challenges around trade. And so many Americans are very concerned and wanting to ensure that trade relations stay strong to ensure the vibrancy of the global economy, but also the impacts it could have on the U.S. economy as well.
Right, and what kind of hold could the U.S. have on Colombia that much? Because, the Colombia's president also tried to fight back, threat for threats, and eventually all is in favor of the White House. What don't we know?
Well, I don't know if it's what we don't know. I think that we obviously have had, there has always been some sort of a speculation around some of the trafficking that goes back and forth between the U.S. and Colombia. Obviously, the economic impacts, tariffs obviously have concerned many countries across the globe. And so and I think that the president's executive orders and what he has shown over just 1 week has many countries noticing that he will move forward with what he states. And so I think Colombia realized that a tariff that could drastically impact their economy was potentially imminent. And so that was, I think, what really pushed the needle on that. And so I don't know if it's any more than we don't know, other than I think realizing that President Trump is very clear about what he states, and there is a high likelihood that he will act on what he states.
Right. Maria, thank you so much for your time. Well, Mr. Trump has started his second term as president, last Monday, and so far he has focused his efforts on signing a series of executive orders and traveling around the country. Professor of International Relations at Achievers University of Ondo State, in Nigeria, Professor Bola Akinteriwa says there's no surprise in what the president has been doing.
I will expect that Donald Trump shouldn't have been voted for. But American voters disregard, the moral aspect. And this is why I think that with the re-election of Donald Trump, I think that the international personality of the United States cannot but be an issue. There is likely to be a decline, in the way the international community will see America in terms of a credible leader, in terms of a leader to be relied upon. And in this type of situation, you can see that Americans voted for him for reasons that are not far-fetched. We know the reasons. For instance, we know quite well that in this type of situation, we want a president who would be able to preach the sermon of a holier than thou. What is it that Donald Trump has been campaigning upon? First of all, the people of America, the current generation of voters, they are not happy with the way their leaders have not actually been giving them priority in terms of better life. They see foreigners as being a major source of their troubles. In this case, they are hostile. Foreigners, immigrants, they give birth to many children. But the indigenous white people, the Americans, they are used to having just 1, 2 children. And they now see immigrants as coming to dominate, the system. They think that they are paying taxes that are, in this particular case, spent, incurred on foreigners. Therefore, they think that they need a president that will put a stop to this. And, Donald Trump capitalized largely on the sentiments of the American people. Donald Trump is trying to promote capitalism at its highest level. You are now promoting protectionism, national interest. You say America first, fine. What does that mean? Explain to me. What is America first? That means that, look, even if you know that what you are doing is not good, is not fair, you promote American interests to the detriment of the interests of all others. That's what you are saying. Then where is the fairness? Where is the justice?
Elsewhere, authoritarian Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko has secured another victory in an election labeled by Western governments as a sham. The Central Election Committee stated on Monday that Mr. Lukashenko won 86.8% of the vote and that turnout was almost 87%. There were 4 other names on the ballot carefully chosen to present no challenge to the current leadership. But no credible contenders were allowed to take part in the election, as all opposition figures are either in jail or in exile abroad. No independent observers monitor the vote either. The EU's foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, said the election had been a blatant affront to democracy, which a German foreign minister, Annalena Baerbock, posted on X that the people of Belarus had no choice. Meanwhile, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said President Vladimir Putin, who has ruled Russia since the year 2000, congratulated his close ally, Lukashenko, for his solid victory. Welcome back. Ceremonies are taking place to mark 80 years since the liberation of the Auschwitz death camp. About 50 survivors have returned to the site to lay wreaths and candles, and some will later give speeches at a service in the camp to be attended by world leaders. Britain's King Charles says it's a somber moment and indeed a sacred one, as he tells a side event in the Krakow that the responsibility of remembrance rests on our shoulders. He becomes the first British head of state to visit the area when he tours the former Nazi concentration camp to mark the 80th anniversary of its liberation. The king has traveled to Poland, where he met with Holocaust survivors and said the act of remembering the evils of the past remains a vital task. Some 1.1 million people, Muslim Jews, were murdered at the complex, making it the site of the largest mass execution of human beings ever recorded. Well, officials in Pakistan, a truck carrying liquefied petroleum gas caught fire and exploded overnight near an industrial area, killing 5 people and injuring more than 24 others. The explosion in Multan, a city in the eastern Punjab province, substantially damaged nearby shops and homes, and the deaths were caused by fire and the collapse of roofs on houses. He said firefighters had extinguished the blaze and officers are investigating to determine exactly what the gas leak in the truck and the subsequent explosion. Brigadier General Christome Sianturi, the head of the Indonesian Army, participated in India's Republic Day Parade 2025 with his contingent. This year's event marks the first time any Indonesian Army contingent is taking part in the celebrations. Brigadier Sianturi expressed gratitude on Sunday for the Indian government's invitation, saying this will enhance the cooperation between India and Indonesia in the future for the sake of the region and global security. India showcased its military might at the Republic Day Parade in New Delhi on Sunday, marking the 76th anniversary of the signing of the country's constitution. Indonesia's personnel from the Army, Navy and Air Force dressed in honor guard uniforms showcased their marching skills in perfect synchrony. Republic Day is annually celebrated on January 26 and marks the day the Constitution of India came into effect.
We would like to express our sincere gratitude and high appreciation for the Indian government who already invited us to participate in Republic Day of India 2025. It is truly honor to us, and we are very excited and surprised that we have a chance and opportunity to perform or to participate in Republic Day of India 2025. And hopefully by this participation in the Republic Day of India 2025, it will remark and it will enhance the cooperation between India and Indonesia in the future for the sake of the regional and global security, and also for the prosperity of the Indonesian people and Indian people itself. Currently, we have 352 soldiers in total who have participated in Republic Day of India 2025. This is for the first time of Indonesian Military Academy cadets participate in overseas events such as Republic Day of India 2025. This is the first experience. Maybe it will be the once lifetime experience for most of the soldiers, even most of the cadets. We're looking forward to participating in other countries' events. If there is any invitation from other countries, and if there is any orders from Indonesian government, especially for the Indonesian headquarters, to order the participation of military academy cadets to such an event like this. They will learn a lot of things from new countries. We not just train in this country, but also we visited some museums, so they will have some knowledge, some experience by exploring the countryside. Like we visited Prime Minister Museum, and then we visited Gandhi Smriti, and they will know the history, who Gandhi is and what Gandhi made for the Indian people, something like that.
Elsewhere, travel chaos continues at Beijing South train station as China's largest and busiest holiday period is in full swing. Footage shows thousands of travelers entering the railway station before being met with large queues at ticket operating machines and platforms. According to authorities, this spring festival will see a record-breaking 9 billion passenger trips made over the 40-day holiday period, with railway trips expected to be close to 600 million. The annual travel mayhem peaks mainly due to the large numbers of students and workers heading back to their hometowns to celebrate China's most important celebration known as Lunar New Year, or Spring Festival, marking the first new moon of the lunar calendar. This year, the celebration falls on January 29, kicking off the 15-day Spring Festival. And tourists have been flocking to the Al Hosni Festival in Abu Dhabi, UAE. The festival is themed a living expression of Abu Dhabi's culture in celebration of the UAE's capital's unique historical heritage and authentic culture. Crowds watch as local artisans spin wool to create bespoke knitted handicrafts. Visitors were also seen enjoying the event's heritage market and traditional dance performances. The festival is held in the oldest building in Abu Dhabi and reflects the city's rich history and vibrant culture. That's our show today. Thank you for watching. I'm Jokia Rogers.